We've been waiting 36 years and, it's a long time to get answers. Too long.
Too long.
Too long.
For almost 4 decades, this family has mourned the loss of teenage cousins, Mona Lisa and Jacinta Cindy Smith.
Just beautiful people all around, didn't like to get into mischief.
Now some questions about what happened to the girls on a lonely stretch of road in outback New South Wales back in 1987 have been answered at a coronial inquest. Magistrate Teresa O'Sullivan found racial bias impacted the investigation into Cindy and Mona's deaths. And because of this, the man, now deemed responsible, got away with it.
In the courthouse, the families of Mona Lisa and Cindy Smith sat quietly as they listened to the state coroner hand down her findings. It's a moment they've been waiting decades for, but for some of the family, it's still not enough.
But it hasn't stopped yet for us, not for me anyway. I'm going to see if I can get someone accountable for their action, even if it's the police or the investigation team or whatever.
The cousins, aged 15 and 16, were found dead on the side of a road just north of Bourke early on a December morning. 40-year-old non-Indigenous man Alexander Ian Grant was found with them. Grant died in 2017, but his version of events was believed in a court of law until this week.
And that's something that's going to stick with me for the rest of my life, and my mum and my brothers.
Taking a stroll on a summer night in 1987, the coroner said Mona Lisa and Cindy accepted a lift from Grant. He plied them with alcohol with the intention to prey on them sexually.
Instead of giving them a lift home, as he should have, Mr. Grant took off with them.
After the ute rolled, farm workers found Grant drunk and unharmed, lying on a tarpaulin with Cindy's body.
Mr. Grant was seen to be cuddling up with Cindy at the scene of the incident with his arm around her waist, whilst her pants were down around her ankles.
When the police arrived around an hour later, Cindy's legs had been parted and she was almost completely naked.
The evidence indicates that Mr. Grant sexually interfered with Cindy after she had passed.
Even if she was alive, she still, she couldn't give consent because she was underage. It was all right for him to do what he did and he got away with everything. Our little sister and my little cousin ended out on the road out there. And still no one was accountable for what happened to him.
Grant was later charged with indecently interfering with Cindy's corpse and culpable driving causing the deaths of both girls. But he was acquitted at his 1990 trial. The girl's family has always asked, how did he get away with it? Former barrister Anthony Quinlivan represented Grant. Grant told police at the scene he was driving, but later changed his story.
My biggest concern about the case was the evidence of Mona Lisa's mother, which was to the effect that her daughter couldn't drive a car.
Quinlivan remembers what he calls a bigoted conversation with a local about Aboriginal kids and driving.
The man said to me that he wouldn't be too worried about that evidence. And I said, why not? And he said, well, who do you think steals all the cars in this town?
So do you think that you played into that prejudice at all in the case?
Oh, no, not at all. It's just something I had stored in the back of my mind.
He says he knew he had to prove Mona Lisa was driving, but still had what he called the problem of the jury.
The first 12 people called up were 10 white people and 2 Aboriginal people. I challenged the 2 Aboriginal people, and we were left with an all-white jury.
Grant's charge of interfering with the corpse was dropped before the criminal trial. The reason given was that it couldn't be determined whether Cindy was dead or alive at the time he molested her. The police failed to tell the family. The first police officer at the scene says he's still haunted by what he calls a gross miscarriage of justice.
I would suggest that the original investigation was a dead set shambles.
A junior constable at the time, Ken McKenzie, gave evidence at the inquest about the conversation he had with Grant at the scene.
And I asked the question who was driving the vehicle at the time, and he said, I was. But then he changed his tune once he realised that the two victims were actually deceased, because he started to comprehend that if he was the driver, that he could be in a spot of bother.
Now Ken McKenzie is reflecting on the racism he witnessed during his time with New South Wales Police.
In those days, there was no love lost between the police and Aboriginal communities in the Bourke district. I saw a lot of racist behaviour while I was in the police service.
He accepts the investigation would have been handled differently if Mona and Cindy were white. The coroner agreed.
In 2019, I was asked to commence reviewing and looking at the deaths of Mona Lisa Smith and Jacinta Rose Smith.
Detective Inspector Paul Quigg found 16 significant failures in the initial police investigation.
The basic rules of gathering evidence and conducting thorough investigations hasn't changed. Unfortunately, back in 1987, some of the basic investigation techniques weren't done. From an investigator's side of things, it was very embarrassing. I think the police were very lackadaisical, and it's like any investigation, if you don't do it properly, it comes back to bite you. And this case is clearly one of those.
It's the end of a long day, but an even longer journey of grief, loss and frustration for Mona Lisa and Cindy's family.
I felt really good inside because I knew my sister couldn't drive. Like, just acknowledging everything that was wrong. You know, that's where I found my peace.
I know it's very hard when you lose a loved one, and you've got to bear with it for the rest of your life. And nothing could bring them back. But we fought as hard as we can to get to where we are today, trying to get justice for our kids, for the two girls.